Welcome to Hacking Postgres, a podcast about extensions, extension creators, and other interesting and innovative things in the world of Postgres. I'm Rye Walker, founder of Tembo, a managed Postgres company. And today I'm here with Tim Sehn from Dolthub. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'd like to start, maybe you could give us a quick background. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? And what were you doing before Postgres?
So I'm Canadian. I grew up kind of around Canada. I went to the University of Waterloo. I graduated in 2003 and started my career at Amazon. It was a pretty small company. When I started, there were about 400 engineers there. So I think there's probably more than 400,000 engineers there now. So pretty fun place to work early days. Kind of grew up there. Left in 2013 to be the head of engineering at this tiny company called Snapchat. I was employee 18 there. Worked there for a little over 4 years. I left that job in 2017 and started this company. And so I've been doing that for a little over 5 years now.
Cool. Do you remember when you first started using Postgres? I can't remember myself, but I'm curious if you remember.
It's interesting. I think the first, I'm not, we've used Postgres to back Dolthub initially. And I'll kind of explain what we're trying to do a little bit more probably later. But I never, I used it through interfaces. The first time that I got kind of deeply familiar with it is, so Dolt, the initial version, is MySQL compatible, not Postgres compatible. So apologize for that on this podcast. Okay. There's a reason for it. So obviously a lot of people through the 5 years that Dolt's been available have come and asked for a Postgres version. And we built a PG dump to MySQL dump converter that we also open sourced. And so I wrote a lot of tests for that and was bug fixing it. So that was kind of the first time I got deeply familiar with the Postgres syntax and ecosystem, and actually probably ran it myself on my machine.
Did you build Dolt, the original version, while at another company, or did you go and just was it a startup from the beginning of the project?
Well, so we started Dolthub because we wanted a place on the internet to share data. Mm-hmm. And we thought that the reason one of those places didn't exist is because you couldn't branch and merge and clone and do all the things you could with databases that you could do with source code. And so we started a company to do that, and we didn't start a company to build Dolt. Dolt was kind of the answer to that problem that we thought we would test.
And so you started Dolt, what year did you say? It was 2017?
So I quit in 2017. I was kind of, I left Snapchat on Friday. I started this company on Monday. By Friday, I was like, I'm not sure I really want to do this right now. And then so I kind of kicked the startup along in the background, like incorporated it, got all the bank account, TIN number, all that kind of stuff. And then my two co-founders, Aaron and Brian, left their jobs in June, July of 2018, and we started this on August 6th of 2018. Okay. So we've been doing it a little over 5 years.
Yeah. So have you raised venture capital?
Yep. We've raised $23 million. We have about 11 million left. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. This isn't one of those kind of calls.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's awesome. So when did you start integrating? I guess when did Dolt support Postgres rather than try to convert from Postgres?
Right. So, we just launched Doltgres QL, a version of Dolt that it uses a Postgres client to connect to it. It is not a Postgres extension; it's its own standalone database, and then we can go into great detail about why that is. And that just launched on November 1st.
Awesome. How hard was it to make?
Well, so we've been thinking about the project for over a year, like planning exploring foreign data wrappers, a bunch of different techniques to pull this off. And we started the project for real in, let's call it like July 1. So to go from nothing to something like a very early alpha launch was 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
So
okay, so not terribly, not a super long adventure to get there.
The way it works is it implements the Postgres client protocol, and then it parses the SQL that comes into an abstract syntax tree, and then it does a conversion of that abstract syntax tree to the type of abstract syntax tree ASD that Dolt understands. And so then at beyond that point, it's Dolt analyzer, Dolt storage.
Yeah. So tell me about is this storage sort of like files, Parquet, or like, how do you store the data?
Well, so that's the novel thing about Dolt. So we took a novel data structure from another open source project called Noms. They had built a content addressed B tree, which they call a Prolly tree. So at the core of every OLTP database, there's B trees. The thing a content addressed B tree gets you is that you can compare two of them in order time of the differences. So if they're the same, right, they have the same content address. If they're different, you walk the tree on both sides to find the different content addresses. And then at the leaves, that's where the data actually is. And then you can find the data that's actually different.
So it's really like files. It's not like it's not like a data lake sort of structure. It's a not proprietary, but like a binary storage engine for
right. Those end up in what we call chunk files, zip chunk files on disk, but it is from the ground up proprietary, not a proprietary, like open source storage format. The
novel. How about novel?
Novel. Yeah, novel. Wrong word. And so with that data structure, so as most software, most people listening to this podcast probably are aware that the core functionality that you need for version controlling anything is the ability to produce a fast diff, because all the functionality that you use, like merge two of these things together, is all based on computing a diff and then applying the diff on either side of the merge. And so, that's why it needs to be its own database. It can't, or at least in the Postgres case we did explore, it would need to be its own storage engine. It would its own foreign data wrap storage engine.
Yep. Okay. So we should probably jump up one level. I realize now I know what Dolt is and you know what Dolt is, but we didn't exactly describe. It's you said it's as if Git and MySQL had a baby, but it's if Git and Postgres or MySQL had a baby.
So Dolt is a version controlled SQL database. It's MySQL compatible. It launched 1.0 in May, so it's 99.99% correct against a suite of 6 million tests, that SQL logic tests that SQLite built. It's about 1.1 times slower than MySQL on writes, and about 2.2 times slower than MySQL on reads. And so it's got OLTP level performance, but it also has version control features. And so you can diff, branch, merge, all the Git idioms that you're used to. In the SQL context, the write operations are exposed as procedures. So you would call Dolt checkout, for instance, call Dolt _checkout with arguments. So it models the Git command line through procedures. The read operations are either exposed as system tables, custom system tables like Dolt _log. And then there's also some SQL functions. So if you want to diff two commits, for instance, you would call Dolt diff and pass in the two commits, and those would produce a table. So it's a table function. So basically there's these novel version control features on top of your standard SQL database. If you never make a Dolt commit, it looks exactly like a Postgres or MySQL database. It's just a head, a single head.
What's the, what are the use cases that you find getting the most traction on this? Where does it work? Where do you, I guess, where are people loving it, and where is it perhaps not the right fit? I'm curious. I'm sure you have this
so
answer.
our canonical customer is this customer called Turbine. They do cancer cell simulations. A cancer cell simulation is about 50 to 100 gigs. They simulate about 50 different cancer cells. And before Dolt, they were putting their data in MongoDB. But as you can imagine, they have a number of researchers that are making changes at the same time to the data, and one canonical copy of the data wasn't enough for them to iterate fast on development. And so they use branches and merges, and they'll have whole teams of researchers modifying a simulation, which usually means modifying the schema on a branch for 6 months, and then if that works better than the current one, they'll merge it in. And so you get the way I describe it is anywhere where your configuration, your data is more like configuration that looks like code, where you're building data, so like a catalog. We have a number of video game companies, so modern video games have many gigs of configuration, like the chest to operate, the strength of this monster, and putting that into Dolt and then using that as part of the development pipeline is a common use case. The third use case is as a machine learning feature store. So whenever you build a model, you create a tag, that's an immutable object. So then you can just, you can refer to that and get reproducibility of your models based on that tag. And so those are the kind of the three core use cases.
Yeah,
we wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, go ahead.
We wouldn't recommend it as like a high throughput, like something to back a website. Like the features are less compelling there. That really you're talking about developer efficiency or the ability to recover from a bad query at the cost of some throughput. And so, so eventually we think it's just a better mousetrap. But right now, we'll take video game configuration feature stores.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. There's, how are people using it? I don't know. Like I think of like the Postgres foreign data wrapper. Like I could keep some of my data in a Dolt table and like sync it into my, let's call it my transactional database, to productionize it, I guess. Have you seen any of that happening where people are, or how do they get it into use, I guess?
People run it as OLTP, right? So it does have pretty good,
just not,
2x.
Not great, right?
Yeah, it's not perfect, but so usually people just run it as their primary. But we do have customers that pull the data out and basically export and do a build process to put it in some sort of hot cache or something. You can set Dolt up as a replica of MySQL, and so we have a couple that just launched in early this year. So we have a couple customers that basically, and in that mode, every write transaction you make on your MySQL primary becomes a commit in Dolt, and so you get full audit log of every cell in the database, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I could imagine there'd be like certain tables that I might care to have history on, but I guess there's different use cases for this, but like if my use case was, I want to have, a good history of how this thing has changed, that would be one. I love, fast forks, is another obviously important thing. Yeah. Okay,
there's two levels of write isolation you can have, right? You can make a branch, which means it's sitting there on your primary, but it's write isolated. If you write to it, but if you make a long running query, that's obviously going to take up resources and potentially slow down your database. But you can also clone, right? Which is the decentralized way of doing it, which is what you're talking about, like fast forking, which is like I just want a copy of this on my local desktop. I want to play with the data, do whatever I want to do with it. And Dolt supports both of those things.
And then how important is, I click on Dolthub and discover databases, and I see like lots of databases. I don't know how many. It seems like an endless scrolling number of databases. Is this like for demo, or is this actually a big part of the value proposition to have like public or semi-public or just shared data published? How important?
That's where we started. That's the problem we tried to solve. I think we might have been a little skipped a few steps. Like version control of source code came out in the 70s, and we only got really a thriving open source community maybe late 90s. We do. So
it's there. Yeah.
We built for a while. We built novel data sets using this process called data bounties, where we would publish schema and we'd say we'll pay $10,000 for any accepted we'll divide up $10,000 prize for based on the amount of data that you submit. And so we've built like a very popular hospital price transparency data set. And so there is novel data on there. The place where we're starting to get a little bit of traction on data sharing is in stock market data. There's this guy, Postgres Preference. He's one of our early customers. He's been publishing for 3 or 4 years now. Rates, options, option pricing. So it's kind of more advanced databases that update daily on stock market data. So it's there. It's not. We think eventually it could be a big piece of what we do. It all works, but it's not. But we kind of consider ourselves a database company, not a data company.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So building the Postgres version of this, what were the biggest challenges you faced during that project?
Right. So we've been thinking about Postgres for a long time. Obviously, I think maybe a better place to start is why is MySQL in the first place? Because NOMS, the storage engine that we built on top of at first, was written in Golang, and so Dolt itself was a command line program like Git. Like the idea was you would build it or you would download it and you'd run it like Git. You'd run Dolt add where you'd run Git add. So when we were it initially didn't have SQL. It was its own format, and then customers came and they're like, well, like data is best expressed as SQL, both schema, and I want to be able to like query what's inside this thing. And so we wanted to add a SQL interface, and Postgres, there's in the MySQL open source ecosystem, there's a project called Vitesse, which is used by it's maintained by the folks at PlanetScale, and we love them. That's a pure Go implementation of the MySQL wire protocol and parser. And so we could take Vitesse and then there was another open source project called Go MySQL Server, which was a pure Go implementation of the MySQL analyzer and where you could plug it with pluggable storage. And so we could get a pure Go implementation of MySQL's wire protocol. So for basically free. Now it wasn't, very correct. It was about 90% correct. But we could add it quickly and we could maintain Dolt as a single binary that you downloaded, right? The deployment install story was very clear. Whereas when we investigated how to do this with Postgres, it would have been something like a file-based foreign data wrapper where you would have to install Postgres and then it would point it at, like it would be a complicated install process for a user. It wouldn't be this seamless download a single binary, import your data, run SQL on it. And so my co-founder Aaron is a huge Postgres fan. I think he was lobbying for Postgres, but the deployment story didn't really make sense at the time. Plus we were kind of considering SQL an add-on, not the core feature. So that's why we chose MySQL is for the deployment story. So that since Dolt launched in August 2019, obviously the first thing people want. I want a Postgres flavor. I want an Oracle SQL flavor. I want a SQL Server flavor. And so we've been talking about like revisiting the file-based foreign data wrapper approach. I'd say the hardest part of doing Doltgres was figuring out how to do it. Was it going to be a file-based foreign data wrapper? Was it going to be a fork of Postgres itself? And there's reasons for that, and I can kind of get into, or were we going to use Dolt's SQL engine and storage, and then just expose the Postgres flavor of SQL? And so basically you connect with a Postgres client, but it's its own database. It's not Postgres itself. And so after some kind of deep investigation, we went with the last option, which is Doltgres is its own database, but it implements the Postgres flavor of information schema, SQL, all that stuff. The reason for that was we couldn't. So the way that Dolt exposes version control functionality is through procedures, custom system tables, and the extension interfaces that you have in Postgres were hard to modify in a way where we could keep the same version control interface, right? So we had a hard time figuring out if it was a file-based foreign data wrapper, how you would say switch branches, right? Yeah. Or even maintain, expose the concept of a branch to Postgres, because Postgres doesn't really know what that is, doesn't expect that. And so there was a lot more that we would need to invent to be able to make it use the Postgres SQL engine.
So you said originally, you thought, the SQL interface was a secondary interface. Has it become the primary interface for most users, or would you
Absolutely.
say that?
We're a database company now. Part of the thing is I'm not sure if people will be watching this, but I have gray hair. I'm not. And one of the one of the things that they that you're taught as a software engineer is never build a database, right? So we tried to build a data sharing tool and got suckered into building a database. But that being said, now that we're deep on this journey and we have what we consider a production grade OLTP database, we're excited that we're there, right? And we think the world can be a better place for this. Certainly makes data sharing and open data much more feasible and compelling.
Yeah. So for a new Doltgres user, would you even mention the CLI, or is it just that's more of a legacy interface, or is it hey, maybe you want this too?
Well, so we've made the conscious choice with Doltgres to not implement the Dolt CLI.
Okay.
So
all right.
The Doltgres, the user interface is very simple. You download it, you run Doltgres, it opens up a port on 5432, and you connect a Postgres client to it, PSQL or whatever, and then you run SQL commands. And so we think in the long run, the way we'll differentiate Dolt and Doltgres is Doltgres will be a version controlled database, and Dolt will be Git for data, which can also be a version controlled database. And so, we find that customers, especially coming to these new concepts, they get confused fairly easily with is it a command line? Should I use the command line? Should I use the SQL interface? And so with Doltgres, it's just the SQL interface.
Are there any big milestones coming up for Doltgres that you're looking forward to?
Absolutely. So one of the first questions we get asked is, okay, I love the features, I really want to use it, how's the performance? And so we become very good at comparing MySQL and Dolt performance. So as I said, like we use Sysbench. We understand the MySQL knobs that we need to turn to make it perform the best, and then or at least perform in a similar fashion to Dolt. And so I'm really excited to run those same Sysbench tests with Dolt against Postgres, because then we can kind of by comparison compare the MySQL to Postgres, which I think is sort of an unanswered performance question. And so I'm kind of excited. I'm both excited to see how Dolt does in comparison to Postgres, but I'm also very excited to kind of answer the question that I've had, which is like, which one of these databases is faster? And so I'm kind of excited to see how that comes out. And that should be, Zach started as first we're working on correctness tests, and then performance tests are next.
Got it. Yeah. It's a lot of work to do that stuff and do it right and make sure you're correct and like,
right. No, it's one of these things. Like we were talking about this yesterday. Like we were on like Yugabyte's website. They publish Sysbench tests. Like a lot of people run Sysbench, but people don't run Sysbench. It's hard to it's like, on OLTP insert it's 34 TPS on Sysbench, but it doesn't on the same hardware. It doesn't give you a benchmark against, say, Postgres. And so you're like, okay, is that good or bad? You have a hard time. And the reason people don't do that is because setting up a database and putting on a bunch of different hardware and figuring out what the best way to kind of explain performance is fraught with peril. You open yourself up to being like, you didn't test it right.
Yeah, right. And if you set up, you could set up Postgres to be, with a few tweaks of some variables, you can set it up to perform worse, right? So the question is, did you tune your competitor as well
exactly.
as you tuned your own? Like, no, I didn't tune my competitor as well as I tuned ours, like,
well, so like a good example for us is, so our benchmarks run on AWS on an EC2 host backed by EBS. And so it's a network attached disk. And that's because the way that we kind of explain that to customers is that, so like if you use hosted Dolt or AWS RDS to run MySQL or Dolt, then that's kind of what you're getting. That's the architecture, and that's kind of what most people use in production. So that's kind of, now Dolt is far less sensitive to disk latency than MySQL. And so if you run the same Sysbench tests on your MacBook, for instance, where that has SSD, MySQL performs much better because it's more sensitive to disk latency. So you open your, this is the kind of thing that you're opening your questions, you're opening yourself up to answer. But these are all interesting things for people to know and to talk about. So I'm happy.
So I noticed that the core project looks like it's Apache 2. Has anyone else offered managed Dolt?
Not yet. I think we would. I would think we would consider that a win. That means it's popular enough, and that that people think they can make money off of hosting it. So that would be great. But no one has offered managed Dolt other than us.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Well, good. This is, I don't know if there's anything I should have asked that I didn't ask. I'd love to, a couple. I always like to ask people like, do you listen to podcasts, and if so, what are your favorite podcasts? I'm a big podcast listener. So
I've listened to a ton of podcasts. I've never driven my car to work in my career. So on my walking commute, I've ever since the first generation iPod, I've been listening to podcasts. I'd say the early classic is Econ Talk, and then and Bill Simmons. Those were the two that I kind of started with, and then over time I've kind of phased out Econ Talk and more like Derek Thompson's. What's the name of that? You can search it. I forget the name of it, but it's another.
I don't know that one either.
I don't listen to very much tech podcasts. The other one that I've been doing recently is The History of Rome, which is like 200 hours or something. And I think I'm at Trajan. So that's like 120 AD or something. So they got like 280 years left of Rome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I listen to. I like history podcasts too. History That Doesn't Suck is one that I just recently discovered and I'm listening to. Have you heard that? It's like all about American history, so it's probably not very interesting to you.
Well, I'm American now. I live in Santa Monica,
Okay.
California. But
well, maybe
Dan Carlin is the king, but he only puts out like one podcast a year. So
whenever I see that drop in my podcast,
it's immediate listen. Well, the World War I one, I've never listened to. I've never had a more enthralling podcast experience. I don't think.
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
I know. And it's so funny, I talk to my kids. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I just listened to a 6-hour podcast on the Genghis Khan," and they're like, "What are you doing?" Like, he's so great. Yeah, so hardcore history, everybody, go listen to that next. And
the thing I'd ask this community, the Postgres community, to do is please tell us what you want. From a version controlled Postgres. So I know like Postgres is about as good as Dolt was for MySQL 2 years ago. And so we have a playbook to kind of get Doltgres to where Dolt is. But there's things we can prioritize. For instance, like one of the things that we released later that we could do first is we could make Doltgres consume the write-ahead log and be a version controlled replica of Postgres. And so we could run fast on that, ahead on that, and that sort of prioritize insert updates, correctness, schema correctness over sort of the read path, and make the read path more, it's like exploratory. And the idea there is like the customer or the operator runs a bad query on your primary, you can find and writes continue, right? You can literally isolate the query, create a patch back on your primary, right? So that would be the one thing I would ask this audience to kind of just, and then also just star a repo. Tell us that you're interested in it.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. Appreciate that. Have you had, I don't know, you said November 1st, and have you had much of a reaction yet? Or you, obviously I reached out.
Well, you found us. It got into the top 10 on Hacker News. So it definitely was, drove a lot of traffic to the website and interest. It's got about 550 GitHub stars. Our main core project has about 16,000, but so it's definitely the thing about it is our customer base has told us we're going to continue to invest in it. So it's not, it's really what percentage of the 16 people we have working on Dolt should I dedicate to Doltgres?
Awesome. Well, it was great to have you on. This is actually episode 10, the last episode for the season. We're going to take a break over the holidays. Appreciate you bookending it for us, and we'd love to have you back on later if as Doltgres progresses and there's more to talk about. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, 100%. It was awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim.